Yay! Yeah, so it's much more a demo than a talk, so that's why I'm going to be sitting, otherwise I'm going to hurt my back. So this is a demo and a quick update, what's happening with Chestnut. So Chestnut is a lining and template to help you get started with Clojure and Clojurescript that sort of tries to be very beginner-friendly, you know, batteries included, everything sort of works straight out of the box. It uses fig wheel, that's quite important, so it tries to give you live reloading of almost everything, even beyond what fig wheel gives you. Make sure that your REPLs work, both for Clojure and Clojurescript. Make sure that there is an example of how to run tests and that's all in there, both for Clojure and Clojurescript. And then make sure that it's easy to deploy. So that in practice means that with 2 commands you can have your thing running on Heroku. So first version came out in September 2014, and this was really, you know, still much more a Clojure noob than I am now. But it took me like 2 weekends just to okay, I want to use fig wheel. Okay, but now my REPL doesn't work. But now fig wheel doesn't work. And then how's this thing? And just getting all those bits and pieces together. So I posted an example, not really a lining and template at that point, but a lot of people seem to like it, and so I turned it into a template. And then since then, we've had 14 releases, including snapshots, but the last one is already from July. So, and even that one was already no longer really up with the state of the art. So fig wheel and Clojurescript, just in general, the whole ecosystem, it's changing so fast. So it was really high time for a big update. So that's what I'm working on now. That's going to be 0.90. And so the snapshot version is already on Clojures, so you can already try that. So I'll go to a REPL, to a terminal to show how that looks. Something like that. So basically you just do line new Chestnut and then the name of your app. I like to call my demo app Sesame, and then it'll generate the app for you with the latest stable version, or if you want to help test or get the latest and greatest that might not be 100% stable, then you can add -- snapshot, and it'll, you know, if you look at Clojures, see that there's regular releases and snapshot releases. So if you just say line new Chestnut, it'll take the latest regular release. If you add -- snapshot, it'll take the latest snapshot release. So this takes a few moments. So I already did this for you. One with the old version and one with the new version. So I'll just go straight into the new version and kind of show you how it works. There's an extensive README. That's also one of the selling points of Chestnut, that it tries to be well documented, and so you can just, you know, without knowing all the details and all the tools, just check out the README and it'll tell you how to get started. So the basic usage is that you open a REPL. And so this can also be aside a REPL, you know, inside your Emacs or inside Lighttable or whatever. Just get a lining and REPL inside your project running. Of course, this is notoriously slow. But once it's there, it's awesome. Okay.
Snapshot versus not snapshot.
Snapshot, yeah, good question actually. So, I mean, snapshot basically means that this is a version that might be overwritten with new versions. So it's a way of saying this is a development release, it's in flux, it's in progress, and so the 0.9.0 snapshot might be different tomorrow than it is today. Actually, it will be different tomorrow because I have some stuff I need to push out. Whereas proper releases are properly immutable the way releases should be. But so yeah, it's just a way of distinguishing. This is the development master version. This is the stable stuff. Okay, so once you have your REPL, you say run, and this will awesome.
Snapshot.
You didn't CD maybe into the project?
You're absolutely right. Okay, so while that loads, I can explain some other stuff. Actually, while that loads, let's actually open this code. So go to the new version. Actually, no. Let me first go to the old version. So this is the top level directory. You see your lining and project file, a README file, source, which contains your source code split by Clojure and Clojurescript, directory for tests, some other stuff like this proc file is so it runs on Heroku, and then env, which is code that gets loaded depending on if you're running on a development setup versus production versus test. But this is actually something that's going away, and so that's been drastically simplified. So I'll talk about that in a minute again. So let's run this. So what this does is it starts Figwheel, make sure you have an HTTP server running, and you can optionally choose to use less or sass for your CSS. So if you don't want to do vanilla CSS, but you want one of those pre-compilers, you can use a flag when you generate your project. And so this run will also then make sure that that pre-compiler is running. So this is really all you need. Now we can go to the usual Figwheel location, and there's our demo app. What we're looking at here is the code. So under source CLJS sesame core.cljs, this is kind of the main entry point for the JavaScript side, the Clojurescript side of things. This is how it looks in the old version. Yes, and this is how it looks in the new version. So actually, this part is still identical. So I can, I'm running the new one, right? So I can, for instance, turn this H1 into an H2, and then, there it is. So it's smaller now. Now it's a little bit bigger again. So you see that that's reloading. Similarly, I can open my CSS, give this maybe another color, and there it is. Okay, so that's fun, but how about on the server side? So here actually a bit more changed. I'll go back to the old version now. Sesame source CLJ sesame server. Okay, so this is what would be generated in the old version. You see it's a lot longer. A couple things to note here. You see stuff here like isDef. So it's doing some conditional checking to see, well, there's certain things we want to do in dev environment that we want to do different in production environment. All of that's gone. Your main server definition is how it should be in production. All the dev stuff is outside of this file. Another thing that you notice here is we're using some nlive stuff, this dev template. So nlive is a, see it here, net.cgrand nlive HTML, is a way of using HTML files as templates, injecting some stuff into it, changing some stuff. And so we did that because in the old version, when you were using Figwheel, well, when you use Figwheel, you need to compile your Clojurescript without optimizations. But that means that in older versions of Clojurescript, you had to manually require your main namespace. You had to have a little script tag inside your HTML saying goog.require this is my main namespace to have a main entry point. Whereas newer versions of ClojureScript, you can just inside your project.clj say, this is my main namespace, and none of that stuff's needed anymore. It works just the same without or with optimizations. So that stuff can go away. Making sure we serve up React, that stuff can go away. It's all handled behind the scenes for us. There's in development mode, we want to make sure that also Clojure stuff is reloaded when we change stuff. So there's some Ring middleware to do that. We no longer have that in there anymore. It's put somewhere else. So basically, if you just look at the new version, it's a lot shorter, it's a lot simpler. But there's also a couple new things here. So we no longer have the end-life of our index.html. Which means that if you go to the root URL / without specifying index.html, then it won't find that static HTML file. So to work around that, we just manually put a route there that loads that HTML file so that it also works at the root without having to specify index.html. And the nice thing about this is that when you look at this file, you already have an example of how to write a composer route. So it's very easy to add a second one here, and let me actually do that. Just that a little new endpoint that serves up some plain text. Okay, so now we have one route that just serves up index.html at the root. We have one for /text that should give us random one of these three strings. And then this one means that any other static files, being this index.html or any of the compiled ClojureScript or CSS, get served up. So let's have a look at that. We should be able to go to /text now, and there it is. So you see, even on the server side, I just added this route. I didn't have to restart, reload anything. It's all there. Right. Let me go back to my notes. Okay, so we saw the basic workflow of running your server, seeing it load up, seeing how everything reloads. Another thing is that if you, so here we have just a regular Clojure REPL, but it's not a ClojureScript REPL. If we want that, we can say browser REPL, and then it should automatically connect, but I might have to actually reload the page. Oh wait, I'm no longer on the page, that's why. So now it's connected to the browser. You can see that I can do a JavaScript alert call, and that brings up an alert box. So that's cool. You still have your REPL, and especially when it's, for instance, when you're using Emacs, you can evaluate expressions in your code and have it go straight to the browser. It's kind of nice. Yeah.
But you're not using Seater and Emacs when you develop, or?
I do. I'm showing it like with a vanilla REPL now, but it works just the same in Insider, for instance. So that's that. Like I said, we also have tests. So let me go back to the root directory of the project. So again, you have your project CLJ and everything here. There's also a test directory. So there's one example that just uses Clojure.test, and one example that uses CLJS.test. Now, in the old version of Chestnut, we actually had a whole bunch of boilerplate in there, because if you want to be able to run this headless, so for instance with Phantom.js, you actually had to have some JavaScript test runner in there and some HTML that Phantom would load. And so there's a project now called DoDo, that actually makes that a lot simpler, which means that you can run your tests with this tool against Phantom.js, against Slimer.js. You can run on Node, you can run on a browser, all with this one lining and plugin. So I can show that line do, and for instance, if I want to run them on Phantom.js, that should be enough. And so that'll run my Clojure tests, whereas if you do a regular line test, that would run the, oops. Yeah, this bit has been changing a lot today, so there might be something missing. It's not Phantom.js, it's Phantom. And so now, since this version, we also include a .travis.yaml, which just runs line test and line do Phantom. So if you push your project to GitHub and you go to Travis and you say enable builds on this project, then straight away you're set. Okay, so it's just compiling some stuff and it's testing, and now it's actually waiting for files to change so you can change a test. Let me try that. I'm in the ClojureScript one here. So 1 is equal to 1, but it's 2 equal to 1, 1 failure. So that's nice. Now it works again. So that's kind of everything that's in there. I'll continue. I'll finish my demo. So we have this endpoint now on our server, which serves up some random text, and I'm actually gonna hook that up to our Ohm app. So Chestnut chose Ohm when it started. So Ohm is a wrapper for React.js. There's a bunch of wrappers for React.js for ClojureScript. Ohm was sort of the first popular one, and now Ohm Next is coming up. And so Chestnut is gonna move along, and so this still needs to be done, but the next version will use Ohm Next instead of regular Ohm. On the other hand, since then Reagent has come along, which is actually from a beginner point of view much easier to use, much more beginner friendly. So most likely we're going to add a flag. It's something I've resisted for a long time, but I think from Chestnut's philosophy of being very beginner friendly, it makes sense to at least have that option of using Reagent if you don't want to have the learning curve of Ohm Next. So that's one flag we're going to add. On the other hand, we dropped a whole bunch of flags. So another goal with this new version is to really be just, opinionated, do one thing well. So we used to have various ways of saying that you, instead of using ohm.dom, you wanted to use ohm tools, or you wanted to use HTTP kit instead of Jetty. So a lot of those flags are going away, but the reagent one, I think, just makes sense. So I'm actually gonna cheat a tiny bit, because otherwise I'm gonna make mistakes. So I'm gonna real quickly, to make this slightly more interesting, make our front end actually connect to this new endpoint that we made on the API. So I'm gonna add an on-click handler to this diff, so that when we click on the diff, it'll fetch one of those random strings and show that as a text. So I need an on-click handler here. Actually, I'm going to use this shorthand syntax here, and we're going to make an XML HTTP request, just using the Google Clojure libraries to our /text endpoint that we created, and then we need a handler for when the result comes back, and again, to save you the pain of me trying this 7 times, I'm just going to copy this in. So when this request completes, this handler kicks in, it gets the response thought this should be response text. Might work. Get the text out of the body out of the response, swap it into our application state, and then ohm re-renders, and you should see this new text. So let's see if that works. Did I close my... guess I closed my REPL. So this will need a minute again. In the meanwhile, so in the end I'll show you push to Heroku as well, and that's really what I find really fun. The fun part is that with 2 commands you can have it, out there for free, running on a Heroku dyno, Heroku instance, and so you can have your toy or serious app, but like have it actually deployed and running in minutes and share it with your colleagues or your friends. So we'll see that in a minute as well. So to quickly go over some of the changes again. So before, in the previous version, we would use our own HTTP kit or Jetty server in development mode to serve up everything, which meant that actually in the old version, you wouldn't use the port that Figwheel uses. So if you went to the Figwheel port 3449, it wouldn't really work, whereas you had to go to the Chestnut port 10555. And that just made things confusing for people, because even when you start the REPL, when you do run, it says, okay, starting Figwheel at this port, starting the server at that port. I would get bug reports saying it's not working. Well, you just have to go to the right port. So in general, I'm making everything much more the way that the Figwheel official template does it, and just have one port there. And so we just give our HTTP handler to Figwheel, and Figwheel does the rest with that. Similarly, to get the Clojurescript REPL, we used to have to depend on an external library called Weasel. Now Figwheel implements its own REPL. It's pretty solid, just makes things easier. We're using Do, I already mentioned that, for testing, makes things easier. A ton of boilerplate has gone away. One neat thing that I actually find really important is that when I go to the old template, and I make some changes, and I want to see what did I actually change. This is actually not yet a Git repository, so I need to git init, commit my initial changes. And so what would happen to me every single time is I generate the app, I start making some changes, I want to commit, and then I'm like, oh, now I need to pull this apart again because I don't want to have my own changes and the initial generated template in the same commit. So what the new Chestnut does is just straight up do a git commit behind the scenes, a git init and a git commit, so that you already have a Git repository and the initial generate is already committed. So now we can actually see just the stuff we changed. So that's nice. Added a logger. So this is also a thing that I just find useful, either development or production. So I can tail log/server.log, and you get sort of a standard HTTP log file. Added Travis support, I mentioned that. Some other things just to make it sort of complete out of the box. So add gzip compression to static assets. So depending on your deployment scenario, I can imagine a lot of people are running behind some kind of Nginx or something that is serving their static assets, and then Nginx will take care of gzipping all that JavaScript and that CSS. But if you're using this, for instance, what we're going to show in a minute, deployed to Heroku, then it's just an Uber jar. It's just one jar that contains all your assets plus a Java server. And then to make sure you still get just basic stuff that you really want to have, like gzip compression on your assets. So we just add some middleware. You don't have to think about that. We dropped a bunch of flags that are no longer relevant or that we no longer want to support. And then finally enabled some Clojure warnings. So these are one on reflections and unchecked math, which are two things. I mean, you can take them out if you find the warnings too tedious, but these are two things that you want to watch out for because they can really degrade the performance of your code. And so Clojure is going to warn you if you're doing some things, and it basically means you want to add type hints to certain things. So just some good defaults out of the box, really. Stuff that's to come is next, as I mentioned, but I'm going to bundle it with Sublono just to make it a little bit more user-friendly, and then add a switch for reagent. So our REPL has started by now. Can run the server again, and then so that's working. That's kind of nice. Finally, another thing that's interesting. So you already just saw this file, user. So like I said before, we had this env directory, envdef, envprod, and these would be added to the class path depending on what your environment was. And so, for instance, this run and this browser REPL, these utility functions for development, we would add in there. All of that's gone. Instead, we have this user namespace, which you'll get by default if you run a REPL. Your REPL starts in user. The nice thing is that you can actually add stuff to user. So the run function and the browser REPL are defined there. And before they used to be pretty tedious, but now we just delegate them to Figwheel. That's another nice thing that's come along with newer versions of Figwheel, that it actually does a lot of that stuff for us. And also, this is our regular HTTP handler, but wrapped in this reload middleware. And this is the one in project.clj will tell Figwheel, okay, this is the HTTP handler where our API and our resources can be found. Serve that. So that just makes things easy. And then the final thing I wanted to show is I can now do Heroku create. And let's see if this works. So I can first of all commit all of this. And then I don't know, raise your hand if you've used Heroku before. Okay, so that's a lot. For people not familiar with Heroku, it's just it basically cloud hosting for your apps. But the nice thing is that you can deploy with Git. So this Heroku created a new instance, a new server, a virtual server, and it also added a new Git remote that I can push to. So I can push to Heroku. And now inside that Git push, Heroku has some hooks to build your app. It starts compiling everything, retrieving all the libraries you need. It builds a Uber jar and then starts that up as a server. And then you're up and running.
Since I haven't used Heroku, I was just wondering, like, is it like a VPN server or something?
It's like a virtual server. Yeah, basically
just to make things easier for you or something.
Yeah, it's just another cloud hosting service like DreamHost or.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, with some nice tooling around it to make deploys very easy, and they have a free plan. So if you don't need a lot of resources, or if you don't need a lot of add-ons, then you can create these things for free. And so it's a nice service to just show off your little projects. I mean, these free plans are quite limited. Like, you really can't use them for anything that gets real traffic. But it's good to have that to actually be able to test something, not just on your own machine. So now it should be done, and I can say Heroku open. And there's our app. This is the URL. Yeah, I think that's it. Any questions? Yes.
So how do you make the reloading of the Clojure rules?
That's actually, there's a ring middleware for that. So there's this rep reload over here. That's a ring middleware reload. It'll watch changes to your files and then do a require namespace :reload on any of those at the beginning of the request. One important thing that is this little bit I added recently, and it's actually needed to make it work. So I'm referencing by var the original HTTP handler, so that if it changes, Figwheel picks up the changes. If I don't do this, then Figwheel keeps looking at the old one, even though we have a new one. Yes?
Does it work in cursive?
I've had reports of people using it in cursive. If you can get just a standard nREPL-based REPL, it should definitely work. For the rest, I haven't been able to really try it, so definitely be interested if you want to try it out, and with the latest snapshot and file an issue if there's any issues. That would be really cool.
Yeah, it works well. Actually, I've been working with Chestnut like around a year ago. We were developing some production stuff with it, but basically we removed some of the boilerplate of the server part because our app was a static app. So that's what I was about to ask. Is there any plans to have a template version for static apps and target for this? That doesn't need the API part because the API is on other servers.
Right. Yeah, so that's, I think Chestnut will stay what it is, sort of have both sides of it, because it, that's kind of nice and complete. If you don't want to use all of it, that's fine. Yeah.
And I think for Chestnut without the server stuff is probably quite close to the regular Figwheel template, maybe.
It's quite close, yeah.
Something like that, maybe the Figwheel template or something.
Yeah, exactly. So there are other templates that are also great. If you prefer to use boot instead of Leiningen, then maybe Tenzing is something you want to look at. Or there are others. Yes.
Are you using Jetty, did you say, always, or is it just an option? And if so, are you using it just because of the overview?
So I'm using Jetty. So originally the default was Jetty with a flag for HTTP kit. I did a little bit of looking around what people are doing now, what sort of the current best practices. It seems that the three options are Jetty, HTTP kit, or immutant. And for instance, Luminous is switching to immutant now, which seems like a good option. So maybe in the future, if that really turns out to have good benefits, might be an option. I think especially for WebSockets, that might be, that's probably the main reason that people now would use HTTP kit instead of Jetty. I'm sticking to Jetty as a default because it's just a good, solid, proven, tried and tested HTTP server. But that's one part that still might be up for discussion in the future.
Has anything changed for the light table support since in the new version compared to the previous one?
Again, I'm not an active user of light tables, so I'm not sure. I know there's some stuff in the README that some other people contributed about how to use it with light table. It shouldn't have changed a lot because we're still sort of using the same workflow that we did before, starting a standard nREPL-based REPL, launching Figwheel. The thing is, in the past, that was a bit of a hack. So that's also, for instance, the Figwheel configuration, we had it duplicated in two places because it's in your project CLJ, but we also needed it to launch it from the REPL. Now, Figwheel has this REPL API, which is still a hack because it goes and reads it from your project.clj, but it bypasses lining, so you don't get any profile merging. But it does it for us, and we're not going to complain. So, and so that's, but conceptually, it's still exactly the same.
You mentioned boot. I imagine what you meant is relying on lining, but I'm a beginner in Clojurescript, and I've been looking both at tutorials using boot. It seems to me that they can do the same thing as like Figwheel now, live reloading of HTML. I'm wondering, do you know, like, if you tell a difference, would it be a stupid idea to go into learning boot or begin?
I'm not sure about that. I haven't had the chance yet to really play around with boot enough. I hear very good stuff about it. I mean, you know, it's one of these things. Lining works, and it's still kind of the default, even though boot is definitely gaining followers. I heard that what is it, modern Clojurescript, really good tutorial series. They're now based on boot, so maybe if you're following that, then you wanna try that using boot. I don't think there's a solid argument for one or against one. They do similar things in different ways, and so it depends on what you know and what you like, basically. But yeah, so there's Tenzing is another application template that Martin wrote that gets you started with boot. So if you want to have something similar but with boot, then you could try that out. Okay, I guess that's it. So Chestnut's on GitHub. There's an elaborate README there. There's a Chestnut group on Clojureverse. So if you just have general questions or if you want help with stuff, this is kind of like our mailing list. So you can check it out there. Yeah, thank you very much. And I still have a few of Chestnut stickers left. Come and talk to me afterwards if you want one.